My name is Baxter Thompson, 72 years old, and I never thought my own flesh and blood could betray me so completely. When Margaret died 3 years ago, her vintage Rolex was my most precious reminder of our 50 years together. Last month, I discovered it missing from my bedroom drawer. My son Thomas looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Stop whining, it's already sold." I needed that money for my trip, but when the pawn shop owner called me back, everything changed. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Lexington, Massachusetts, where my father worked as a postal carrier and my mother taught piano lessons from our living room. We never had much money, but they instilled in me a strong work ethic and appreciation for the simple joys of life. After high school, I earned a scholarship to Boston University to study engineering, which is where my life truly began in the fall of 1971. I first spotted Margaret James in the university library during my sophomore year. She sat by a window, sunlight catching her auburn hair as she pored over a collection of poetry. I pretended to browse nearby shelves for 20 minutes before summoning the courage to speak to her. When I finally did, she smiled and revealed she had noticed me circling like a nervous shark. That gentle teasing broke the ice, and we talked until the library closed. Our connection was immediate and undeniable. Margaret studied literature with a passion that brought books to life in ways I had never experienced. She saw beauty in details others overlooked. On our third date, she stopped at a jewelry store window to admire a display of watches. "Timepieces fascinate me," she explained. "Each one carries moments of someone's life." She pointed to a gleaming Rolex. "Someday, I'll own one of those, not for showing off, but as a reminder that every second is precious." We dated throughout college, exploring Boston together, studying late in coffee shops, and dreaming of our future. I proposed the week before graduation beneath the same library window where we first met. We married in June 1973, a small ceremony with close friends and family, then scraped together a down payment for a tiny starter home in Cambridge. Those early years tested our resolve. Margaret worked as a teaching assistant while pursuing her master's degree in literature. I landed an entry-level position at an engineering firm that designed industrial equipment. We budgeted carefully, saved diligently, and supported each other's ambitions. When Margaret faced rejection from academic journals, I encouraged her to keep submitting her work. When I struggled with difficult projects, she stayed up late helping me think through solutions. After 5 years of marriage, Margaret secured a position as an assistant professor at Tufts University. 2 years later, I was promoted to senior engineer. We decided to delay having children to establish our careers first, a choice that raised eyebrows among our more traditional relatives but felt right for us. Through the late 70s, we moved to a larger home in Arlington and built our professional reputations. Margaret became known for her insightful analyses of American literature, while I specialized in designing safety systems for manufacturing plants. We traveled during summer breaks, hiking in national parks and exploring coastal towns. In 1982, after nearly a decade of marriage, we felt ready to start a family. Thomas arrived in May 1983, a healthy, curious baby who changed our world. Margaret took a semester off to care for him. Then we balanced parenthood with our careers. I still remember holding him while reviewing blueprints at our kitchen table, and Margaret grading papers with Thomas asleep on her chest. Through Thomas's childhood, we maintained special traditions that bound us together. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts where we discussed our week. Summer road trips with educational detours Margaret planned. The annual Christmas Eve reading of Dickens that Margaret performed with theatrical voices. When Margaret earned tenure in 1988, she finally fulfilled her long-held dream. After 15 years of saving, she purchased her Rolex Datejust. Not the most expensive model, but the one she had admired for years. She wore it proudly during significant moments. Thomas's high school graduation, my company's award ceremony, her department chair appointment. The watch became a symbol of our partnership and perseverance. Margaret would tap its face during challenging times and say, "This reminds me that we've earned every minute of our happiness." For our 40th anniversary in 2013, Our closest friends and family gathered at our favorite restaurant. Margaret stood to toast our years together, her Rolex catching the candlelight as she raised her glass. "Time is the most precious gift we give each other," she said. "Baxter has given me 40 years of his, and I've treasured every second." That night remains crystallized in my memory, her voice steady and warm, her eyes holding mine across the table, the future stretching comfortably before us. Little did we know how quickly that future would be stolen from us. We had planned a trip to Maine in summer 2018 to celebrate Margaret's upcoming retirement. She had been feeling unusually tired, but dismissed it as end-of-semester exhaustion. During our second day at a coastal inn, she doubled over with abdominal pain so severe I had to carry her to the car and rush to the nearest emergency room. The local doctor ordered scans that revealed a mass on her pancreas. "You need to see a specialist immediately," he advised with a gravity that made my blood run cold. We cut our vacation short and drove home in silence, both of us afraid to voice our fears. 3 days later, an oncologist at Massachusetts General Hospital delivered the devastating news. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer that had already spread to her liver. "What's the prognosis?" Margaret asked calmly, while I could barely breathe. "With aggressive treatment, perhaps 6 to 12 months, the doctor replied. "I'm so sorry." Margaret's hand found mine, her Rolex cool against my skin. "Then we'll make them count," she said. She approached her diagnosis with the same methodical determination she brought to her academic work. We sought second opinions, researched experimental treatments, and assembled a medical team. Meanwhile, I notified my company that I needed to take early retirement. "Margaret comes first now," I told my boss, who understood immediately. Thomas and his wife Amanda flew in from Chicago the weekend after the diagnosis. Thomas appeared genuinely shaken, hugging his mother tightly and promising to help however needed. Amanda, always image-conscious, seemed uncomfortable in the hospital but managed to offer support through awkward pats and forced smiles. The treatment regimen began swiftly and brutally. Chemotherapy drained Margaret's energy and stole her appetite. Radiation burned her skin. Medications caused constant nausea. I transformed into her caregiver, preparing bland foods she might tolerate, administering medications on strict schedules, driving to countless appointments, and holding her hair back during violent bouts of sickness. Despite the physical toll, Margaret insisted on maintaining some normalcy. She advised graduate students from our sunroom when she felt strong enough. She joined her book club via video calls. Most importantly, she recorded audio messages and wrote letters for future occasions she knew she would miss. Thomas and Amanda visited monthly at first. Thomas would sit with his mother, sometimes reading to her from her favorite novels. Amanda busied herself reorganizing our kitchen cabinets or scrolling through her phone. Their visits gradually shortened as Margaret's appearance changed. Her hair gone, her vibrant presence diminished to a whisper of her former self. By winter, scans confirmed what we already sensed. The treatments were not working. The cancer continued its relentless spread. Margaret made the difficult decision to stop chemotherapy and focus on quality of life with hospice support. "I want to be present for whatever time remains," she explained. We converted our bedroom into a comfortable space with a hospital bed near the window, overlooking our garden. The hospice team taught me to administer morphine for pain and anti-nausea medications. I slept on a cot beside her, waking at the slightest sound to check if she needed anything. On a lucid evening in early March, Margaret asked me to bring her jewelry box. Her fingers, now thin and trembling, sought out her Rolex. "This watch has witnessed our best moments," she whispered. "When I'm gone, keep it close. Each tick is a reminder that our love transcends time." I promised through tears, unable to imagine a world without her. Thomas visited alone the following weekend. Amanda had begged off, claiming a previous commitment. He sat awkwardly beside Margaret's bed, clearly disturbed by her deterioration. "You should get some rest, Dad," he suggested. "I can stay with Mom for a few hours." Grateful for his offer, I took my first long walk in weeks. 2 nights later, Margaret slipped into unconsciousness. The hospice nurse warned me the end was near. I held Margaret's hand for 26 straight hours, whispering our memories into her ear. Our first date, Thomas's birth, walks along Cape Cod beaches, quiet evenings reading together. On March 12th, with the first spring rain tapping against the window, Margaret took her final breath. Thomas took charge of the funeral arrangements, showing unexpected efficiency. He contacted Margaret's colleagues, coordinated with the funeral home, and helped me select readings for the service. His practical support allowed me to exist in the fog of early grief without drowning completely. The funeral drew hundreds, former students, colleagues, neighbors, and friends whose lives Margaret had touched. I moved through the day in a haze, accepting condolences automatically while feeling hollowed out inside. Thomas delivered a surprisingly eloquent eulogy about his mother's influence on his appreciation for literature and learning. After the mourners departed and Thomas and Amanda returned to Chicago, the true weight of solitude descended. Our home of 30 years echoed with Margaret's absence. I found myself talking to empty rooms, reaching across the bed at night, setting 2 places at breakfast before remembering. During those first months, Margaret's Rolex became my tether to sanity. I placed it in the drawer of her bedside table, cushioned in her favorite silk scarf. On particularly unbearable nights, I would hold it in my palm, its gentle ticking a reminder that time continued even when my world had stopped. I could almost hear Margaret whisper, "Keep going, my love." 1 second at a time. The first year without Margaret unfolded in a colorless blur. I wandered through our home like a ghost, touching her books, smelling her perfume on unwashed sweaters, and playing her favorite classical records that only deepened my loneliness. Friends invited me to dinners I barely tasted. Neighbors offered help I rarely accepted. The garden Margaret had lovingly tended withered under my neglect. Thomas insisted I join him and Amanda for Sunday dinners at their condominium in Boston, where they had relocated 6 months after Margaret's funeral. "Dad needs structure," he explained to Amanda, as though I weren't sitting across from them. These meals began as a welcome anchor to my untethered weeks, though the conversation often felt strained. Amanda would document these dinners with carefully staged photographs for her social media accounts. "Family time with my grieving father-in-law," she captioned one, garnering sympathetic comments from strangers. I discovered this accidentally while trying to send her a thank you email and felt uncomfortably like a prop in her online narrative. As months passed, subtle changes emerged in Thomas's behavior. His phone calls became less frequent and shorter. At dinners, he increasingly steered conversations toward their financial concerns. The promotion he deserved but didn't get, the neighboring condo they couldn't afford, Amanda's desire for a luxury vehicle like her friend Stephanie's. "Mom's car is just sitting in your garage," Thomas mentioned casually around the 15-month mark after Margaret's passing. "You don't even drive it. We could sell it and put that money to good use." "I'm not ready to part with it yet," I replied, surprised by his suggestion. Thomas exchanged glances with Amanda. "You can't hold on to everything forever, Dad. It's not healthy." Amanda nodded vigorously. "Thomas and I have been reading about grief processing. Holding on to possessions can really stunt emotional growth." Their amateur psychological assessment stung more than they could know. Margaret's Subaru remained in our garage not from unhealthy attachment, but because driving it to the grocery store allowed me to pretend, for brief moments, that she might be waiting when I returned home. Thomas and Amanda's lifestyle puzzled me. Despite their frequent complaints about finances, they vacationed in Nantucket, dined at exclusive restaurants, and renovated their condo with designer furnishings. Thomas worked as an investment advisor, but seemed perpetually dissatisfied with his income. Amanda managed a boutique clothing store and constantly updated her wardrobe with expensive pieces she modeled online. "You know, Dad," Thomas said during a particularly tense dinner, "you're living in that big house all alone. Think about how much equity you have just sitting there unused." "Your mother and I chose that home to raise our family," I responded. "It holds our memories." "Memories don't pay bills," Amanda muttered, scrolling through her phone. Their hints grew more pointed. "We could help you downsize," Thomas offered. "The market is hot right now. You could buy something smaller and have plenty left over to enjoy retirement. Maybe help family out a bit too." When I didn't take their bait, their disappointment manifested as distance. Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly obligations. Thomas began citing work commitments to abbreviate visits. Amanda stopped pretending interest in my well-being altogether. At my doctor's suggestion, I joined a grief support group at the community center. There, among others navigating loss, I found genuine understanding. Harold had lost his husband of 30 years. Diane was widowed after her wife's battle with breast cancer. Luis mourned his partner of 4 decades. We shared stories without judgment, cried without embarrassment, and occasionally even laughed together. Through this group, I slowly reconstructed a semblance of social life. We attended concerts at the park, tried restaurants our partners had enjoyed, and checked in on each other during difficult anniversaries and holidays. Their friendship offered authentic connection without the undercurrent of expectation I felt with Thomas. I attempted to rebuild my relationship with my son by inviting him to join me for a baseball game, a passion we had once shared. "Sorry, Dad, tickets are too expensive these days," he declined, though I had offered to pay. The following week, I saw photos on Amanda's account of them attending a luxury box event at the same stadium, guests of a client Thomas was courting. The final fracture began with a phone call in early spring, 2 years after Margaret's death. Thomas sounded unusually upbeat. "Dad, we have exciting news. Amanda and I are planning a European tour this summer. London, Paris, Rome, Barcelona, first class all the way." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely happy to hear enthusiasm in his voice again. "Your mother always wanted to see Rome." "Yeah, well," he hesitated. "That's actually why I'm calling. We're a bit short on the full experience we've planned. I was thinking, since you're not using Mom's retirement savings." The implication hung heavy between us. Margaret's modest teacher's pension supplemented my own retirement income, allowing me comfortable but not extravagant living. "Thomas, those funds are what I live on," I explained carefully. "I can't spare much for luxury travel right now." "Right," he replied, his tone cooling instantly. "I figured you'd say that. You know, other parents help their kids experience life while they're young enough to enjoy it. But hey, keep hoarding it all. Not like you're spending it on anything important." The conversation ended awkwardly, with Thomas promising to check in soon, a promise he didn't keep. Their European trip planning proceeded without further mention of financial assistance from me, though Amanda's social media buzzed with countdowns and designer luggage purchases. 2 weeks later, they arrived unannounced at my door on a Saturday afternoon. Amanda air-kissed my cheek while Thomas explained they were in the neighborhood and thought they'd stop by. Their sudden appearance after weeks of silence made their agenda transparent before they even settled onto the sofa. "Dad," Thomas began with practiced casualness, "we've been thinking about your situation. You must get lonely in this big house with all these things reminding you of Mom. It can't be healthy." Amanda nodded solemnly. Grief experts recommend fresh starts. Their concern might have seemed genuine, if not for the calculating glances they exchanged. "I appreciate your concern," I replied cautiously, "but I'm managing well. My support group has been helpful." Thomas leaned forward. "Look, we have a proposal that could benefit everyone. We found a nice assisted living community near us. You could sell this place, move there, and have plenty left over. Maybe help us with our Europe trip as an early inheritance. Mom would have wanted you to help us create memories." The invocation of Margaret's wishes to manipulate me crossed a boundary I couldn't ignore. "Your mother valued education and experiences," I said quietly, "but she also believed in earning what you receive. She worked 15 years to buy her Rolex, rather than asking her parents to fund it." Thomas's expression hardened. "That watch probably sits in a drawer collecting dust. It could fund our entire trip if you sold it." "The Rolex stays with me," I stated firmly. "Margaret wanted me to keep it." The visit ended soon after, with Thomas and Amanda departing with transparent disappointment. I stood in the doorway watching their luxury SUV pull away, wondering when my son had transformed from the thoughtful boy Margaret and I raised into this entitled stranger. Little did I know that the mention of the Rolex had planted a seed that would soon shatter whatever fragile connection remained between us. May 15th would have been Margaret's 71st birthday. Since her passing, I had established a private ritual for this day. I would wake early, brew her favorite French roast coffee, and take her Rolex from its special place in my bedside drawer. I would wind it carefully, set it to the correct time, and wear it on my wrist while visiting her favorite places: the university garden where she often read papers, the small bookshop downtown where she attended poetry readings, the harbor bench where we watched sunsets. That morning, I opened the drawer and reached beneath the silk scarf, where I always kept the watch. My fingers found only empty space. Confused, I removed everything from the drawer, thinking the watch might have shifted position. When this yielded nothing, a spike of panic shot through me. I searched the adjacent drawers, under the bed, inside the jewelry box where Margaret kept her other pieces. The methodical search soon gave way to frantic upending of furniture, emptying of cabinets, and checking improbable locations. The Rolex was simply gone. 3 hours of increasingly desperate searching left me sitting on our bedroom floor surrounded by displaced belongings, my hands shaking with distress. Had I been robbed? There were no signs of forced entry. Had I absent-mindedly moved the watch? Unlikely, given its emotional significance. Only one other possibility remained, too painful to consider but increasingly probable. I called Thomas, my heart pounding as the phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Dad, what's up?" His voice sounded guarded, lacking the concern one might expect from a simple greeting. "Thomas, I can't find Mom's Rolex. Have you seen it? I always keep it in my bedside drawer, but it's not there." I tried to keep my tone neutral, allowing for innocent explanations. The pause before his response told me everything. "Oh, that. Yeah. We took it last time we visited. You never wear it anyway." The casual admission struck me with physical force. "You took it? Without asking me?" "Look, Dad." Thomas's voice took on a patronizing tone I'd grown to recognize. "You're always talking about Mom's memory, but you keep everything locked away. At least now her watch will fund experiences she would have approved of. That watch was the most important keepsake I had of your mother," I managed, my voice breaking. "She specifically asked me to keep it. You had no right." "Stop whining. It's already sold," Thomas interrupted coldly. "I needed that money for my trip. What's done is done." The finality of his statement hit me like a blow. "You sold it? Already? Without even asking me?" "It's just a thing, Dad. You need to let go. Besides, technically it belonged to Mom, so it's part of my inheritance anyway." The twisted logic and utter disregard for my feelings left me speechless. Without another word, I ended the call, grabbed my car keys, and drove straight to Thomas and Amanda's condominium. 20 minutes later, I pressed their doorbell repeatedly until Amanda opened the door, her annoyed expression shifting to surprise when she saw me. "Baxter, we weren't expecting you. Thomas is on a work call," and I stepped past her into their expensively furnished living room. "I need to speak with my son." Now, Thomas emerged from his home office, his expression a mixture of irritation and defensive preparation. "Dad, this isn't a good time for a drop-in. You stole your mother's watch," I stated flatly, my voice steadier than I felt. "The watch she specifically wanted me to keep." Amanda folded her arms. "Technically, it wasn't stealing. Family property is shared inheritance." "That's not how inheritance works," I replied, struggling to maintain composure. "And you know it." Thomas shrugged, leaning against the doorframe with calculated casualness. "Look, what's done is done. The watch is sold, and we leave for Europe in 3 weeks. Mom would have wanted us to experience the world while we're young. Don't tell me what your mother would have wanted," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. "Margaret saved for 15 years to buy that watch. She wore it every day. She asked me to keep it as her final request." "Well, maybe she should have specified that in her will," Amanda interjected with a smirk. The callousness of her statement stunned me into momentary silence. In that pause, I truly saw the lavish surroundings of their home, the designer furniture, the expensive artwork, the luxury items casually displayed, all while they claimed financial hardship. "Where did you sell it?" I finally asked. "Which pawn shop?" Thomas rolled his eyes. "Does it matter? It's gone. The money spent on non-refundable bookings. You need to move on." "It was just collecting dust in your drawer," Amanda added. "At least now it's funding memories. Stop being so materialistic." The hypocrisy of this statement, coming from their shrine to conspicuous consumption, might have been laughable in different circumstances. That watch was my most tangible connection to your mother, I said quietly. Every time I held it, I felt close to her again. It wasn't about the object's value. It was about what it represented. Oh, please, Thomas scoffed. Mom was more than a watch. If you actually processed your grief properly instead of clinging to stuff, you'd know that. Something fractured inside me then. The last thin thread of understanding that had connected us. Your mother would be ashamed of who you've become, I said, the words escaping before I could reconsider them. Thomas's face darkened. Get out of our home. Now. Gladly, I replied, moving toward the door. But know this, what you've stolen can't be replaced, and neither can my trust in you. The drive home passed in a blur of grief and disbelief. How had the thoughtful boy Margaret and I raised transformed into this selfish stranger? What failures in our parenting had led to such entitlement and callousness? I arrived home to the chaos of my earlier search. Upended drawers, displaced furniture, scattered possessions. The physical disarray perfectly mirrored my emotional state. I sank into Margaret's reading chair, surrounded by the wreckage of my desperate hunt for her last gift to me. On the bookshelf nearby sat our family photo albums. I pulled one from the shelf, Thomas's childhood pictures, his gap-toothed smile at 7, his proud pose with his science fair project at 12, his high school graduation with Margaret beaming beside him in her departmental robes, her Rolex visible on her wrist as she hugged our son. As night fell, I discovered an envelope in Margaret's desk I had overlooked during my previous organizing. Inside was a handwritten letter about her Rolex, explaining its significance not just as a timepiece but as a symbol of our partnership and shared dreams. Time is our most precious resource, she had written. This watch reminded me daily to spend it wisely, with those I love. The irony of Thomas selling this symbol of treasured time to fund fleeting pleasures was almost too painful to bear. But beneath my grief and anger, a quiet determination formed. I would try to find the watch. Even if the chance was minimal, I had to try. The next morning, I began methodically calling every pawn shop within a 20-mile radius. I started with businesses closest to Thomas and Amanda's condominium, working outward in concentric circles. The script became familiar after the first few attempts. Hello, my name is Baxter Thompson. My son recently sold a women's Rolex watch to your establishment without my permission. It belonged to my late wife and holds tremendous sentimental value. I'm hoping to purchase it back. Most responses followed predictable patterns: confused sympathy, regretful denials, or suspicious questioning about my motives. By midday, I had called 17 shops with no success. My voice grew hoarse, and my hope diminished with each negative response. Sir, we haven't had any Rolexes come through in months, one shop owner explained. We would need proof of ownership and a police report for stolen property, another advised. Luxury watches move quickly, a third informed me. Even if we had it, it's probably already sold to a collector. During a discouraged break for lunch, a sandwich I barely tasted, my phone rang. Harold from my grief support group was checking in. You missed our meeting yesterday, he noted with concern. Everything okay, Baxter? The simple question broke through my determined isolation. I explained the situation in halting sentences, emotion welling unexpectedly as I articulated the betrayal aloud. Jesus, Baxter, that's awful, Harold responded, genuine outrage in his voice. Have you filed a police report? The suggestion hadn't occurred to me. Would they even consider it theft if it was my son who took it? Absolutely, Harold insisted. Theft is theft, family or not, and having a report might help if you do track down the watch. That afternoon, I drove to the Arlington Police Department, where a young officer named Rivera took my statement. His professional demeanor softened as I explained the circumstances. Unfortunately, we see family theft cases more often than you'd think, Officer Rivera said, especially with valuable items and elderly victims. The term elderly victim stung slightly. I hadn't considered myself elderly at 72, but I recognized the accuracy of the classification. The challenge here, he continued, is proving the watch was explicitly yours and not joint property. Do you have documentation? The original receipt? Insurance listing? I explained that Margaret had purchased it herself before we combined our finances. The original documentation was likely long gone after multiple home reorganizations. Officer Rivera sighed. I'll file the report, Mr. Thompson, but I want to set realistic expectations. Without clear proof of ownership and with the family relationship involved, this may be considered a civil rather than criminal matter. He took detailed notes about the watch. A women's Rolex Datejust, stainless steel with a white gold fluted bezel, champagne-colored dial, purchased around 1988. The serial number was unknown to me, another complication in the search. One more thing, Officer Rivera said before I left. I know some of the reputable jewelry and pawn dealers in the area. Let me make some calls for you. His unexpected kindness brought a lump to my throat. Thank you. That would mean a great deal. 2 days passed, with no developments. I continued my own calls to pawn shops in neighboring towns, each negative response diminishing my already fading hope. The emotional energy required for these conversations drained me completely. Each night, I fell into exhausted sleep in Margaret's reading chair, unable to face our empty bed. On the third day, Officer Rivera called. Mr. Thompson, I might have a lead for you. A colleague mentioned that Wilson's Pawn and Jewelry on Maple Street recently had a women's Rolex come through. The description sounds similar to what you're looking for. My heart raced as I scribbled down the address. Thank you, officer. I can't tell you what this means to me. Don't get your hopes too high, he cautioned. But it's worth checking out. I drove immediately to Wilson's, a small but well-maintained shop in a commercial area I rarely visited. The bell above the door announced my entrance, and a middle-aged man with a neat beard looked up from behind a glass counter. Welcome to Wilson's. I'm Frank Wilson. How can I help you today? I explained my situation, watching his expression carefully for any sign of recognition. When I described the watch, Frank's eyes widened slightly. We did have a lady's Datejust come through recently, he confirmed. Champagne dial, fluted bezel, Jubilee bracelet. The accurate description sent a surge of hope through me. Yes, that's it exactly. Do you still have it? Frank's expression turned apologetic. I'm sorry, sir. We authenticated it and put it up for sale last week. A collector purchased it 2 days ago. The brief flare of hope extinguished, leaving me hollow. I see. I managed. Is there any way to contact the buyer? I'd be willing to pay well above market value. Frank hesitated. We typically can't share customer information. Privacy policies. Please, I implored, my voice breaking slightly. That watch was my wife's most treasured possession. She died of cancer 3 years ago, and specifically asked me to keep it. My son took it without permission. Something in my desperation seemed to reach him. Frank studied me for a long moment. Let me take your contact information, he finally said. I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do. I wrote down my name and phone number with trembling hands. Thank you for even considering it. The watch was in excellent condition, Frank offered, perhaps as consolation. Your wife obviously took very good care of it. She did, I nodded, tears threatening. She treasured it, not for its value, but for what it represented. Frank walked me to the door. I understand more than you might think, Mr. Thompson. My father left me his pocket watch when he passed. It's not worth much monetarily, but I wouldn't sell it for any price. His understanding, when my own son had shown none, was both comforting and painful. I thanked him again and left with little expectation of hearing back. 3 more days passed. I tried to resume normal activities, attending my support group, tending Margaret's neglected garden, sorting through books for donation, but the loss of the watch weighed heavily, a physical ache in my chest. On the 4th day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered without much thought, expecting a telemarketer. Mr. Thompson, this is Frank Wilson from the pawn shop. I sat up straight, suddenly alert. Yes, Frank. I appreciate you calling back. Sir, he said, an odd note in his voice. I managed to contact the buyer about your situation. But there's something else. When we were preparing to ship the watch, our technician made an interesting discovery. Discovery, I repeated, confused. Yes, sir, Frank continued. You need to see what we found inside the watch. Can you come to the shop tomorrow morning? Inside the watch? My mind raced with possibilities. What did you find? I think it's better to show you in person, Frank replied. The buyer has actually agreed to return the watch, given the circumstances. They were quite moved by your story. Sleep eluded me that night. What could possibly be inside Margaret's watch? An inscription I had somehow missed? A manufacturing defect? Whatever it was. The prospect of seeing the Rolex again, perhaps even reclaiming it, kept my thoughts churning until dawn. I arrived at Wilson's Pawn and Jewelry 20 minutes before their posted opening time, unable to contain my anticipation. Frank noticed me waiting outside and unlocked the door early, ushering me into the climate-controlled shop with a sympathetic smile. Thank you for coming so promptly, Mr. Thompson. Please, have a seat. He gestured to a small consultation area near the back of the store. You said you found something inside Margaret's watch? I prompted, too anxious for small talk. Frank nodded, disappearing briefly into a back room. He returned carrying a familiar blue Rolex box, setting it carefully on the table between us. My breath caught at the sight. When we receive luxury watches, Frank explained, we authenticate them thoroughly before resale. Our watchmaker opens the case to verify the movement is genuine and check for any damage or needed service. He opened the box, revealing Margaret's Rolex nestled on its cushion. The sight of it, the gleaming band, the distinctive fluted bezel, the champagne-colored dial she had loved, brought an unexpected sob to my throat. While examining your wife's watch, Frank continued, gently lifting it from the box. Our technician noticed something unusual. The case back had been professionally opened and resealed at some point, though not recently. He turned the watch over, pointing to the smooth stainless steel back. Normally, only watchmakers open these with specialized tools. But someone had done so very carefully, and when our technician opened it to check the movement, he found this. Frank carefully unscrewed the case back with a small tool, revealing the intricate mechanical movement inside. With delicate precision, he used tweezers to extract something I hadn't noticed at first. A tiny folded paper tucked alongside the movement, barely visible to the naked eye. It was positioned so carefully that it didn't interfere with the watch's function, Frank explained. Whoever placed it there knew exactly what they were doing. My hands trembled as he handed me the minuscule folded paper. This is why I contacted the buyer immediately. When I explained that your late wife's watch contained what appeared to be a personal message, they understood the significance and agreed to return it. They'll be arriving shortly, actually. I carefully unfolded the delicate paper, its creases suggesting it had been there for some time. As it opened fully, about the size of a postage stamp, I recognized Margaret's distinctive handwriting, impossibly tiny but perfectly legible. My darling Baxter, the note began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, but my love remains with you, marking every second of every day. Time gave us our greatest gift, each other. Now use your time to find joy again. You deserve happiness, my love. Remember me, but please live fully. All my love, for all time, Margaret. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Margaret had secretly placed this message inside her most treasured possession, knowing someday I might find it. The thought of her planning this final communication, her hands carefully folding the tiny paper, arranging for a watchmaker to place it safely inside, overwhelmed me completely. She knew, I whispered, more to myself than to Frank. Somehow, she knew I would need these words. Frank respectfully remained silent, allowing me this moment of profound connection across time and beyond death. Finally, he spoke softly. Mr. Thompson, I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen countless valuable items, but I've never encountered something this meaningful. This watch isn't just valuable as a timepiece. It's priceless as a final message from your wife. The shop door chimed, announcing another visitor. Frank glanced up. That would be Miss Peterson, the buyer who agreed to return the watch. A woman in her 50s entered, dressed in business attire. Her expression softened when she saw me holding the tiny note. Mr. Thompson, she approached, extending her hand. I'm Catherine Peterson. Frank explained your situation. I stood shakily, overwhelmed by emotion. Miss Peterson, I don't know how to thank you. This watch means more than I can express. She smiled gently. When Frank called and explained about finding your wife's hidden message, there was no question in my mind. Some things transcend monetary value. Please, I insisted. Let me reimburse you. Whatever you paid, plus additional compensation for your trouble. Catherine shook her head firmly. That won't be necessary. I collect vintage watches because each has a story. But this watch has a story that belongs uniquely to you. I would never want to separate someone from such a profound connection to their loved one. Her unexpected compassion, from a complete stranger, contrasted sharply with my own son's callous disregard. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say you'll treasure it and honor your wife's wishes, Catherine replied simply. That's all the payment I need. Frank carefully reassembled the watch, securing the movement and Margaret's note safely inside before screwing the case back in place. The message doesn't interfere with the mechanism, he assured me. It can stay there safely, just as your wife intended. He handed me the watch, and I slipped it onto my wrist, the first time I had worn it rather than simply holding it. Though designed for a woman's wrist, it fit mine well enough on the loosest setting of the Jubilee bracelet. Would you like to know how it came to my shop? Frank asked. I nodded, still struggling to process the emotional weight of Margaret's message. A young couple brought it in about 2 weeks ago, he explained. The man seemed nervous, checking his phone constantly. The woman did most of the talking, pushing for the highest possible price. When I offered them a fair market value, she complained, but he quickly accepted, said something about needing it for non-refundable reservations. The description matched Thomas and Amanda perfectly. My son and his wife, I confirmed. Frank nodded thoughtfully. I sensed something wasn't quite right about the transaction, but the watch had no liens or registry listings as stolen. Now I understand why the man seemed uncomfortable. He knew he was selling his mother's watch against his father's wishes. Thank you both, I said, looking between Frank and Catherine. In a world where my own son could betray me so deeply, your kindness restores some of my faith in humanity. Catherine smiled warmly. Sometimes strangers can show more compassion than family. I hope your son someday realizes what he discarded so carelessly. As I prepared to leave, Frank refused payment for his time or services. Seeing an item returned to its rightful owner is payment enough in this business. Too often, I see precious heirlooms sold for a fraction of their true worth, not their monetary worth, but their emotional value. With Margaret's watch secured on my wrist and her message safely hidden inside, I left Wilson's with a profound mixture of emotions. Grief at my son's betrayal, joy at recovering Margaret's precious gift, and wonder at the kindness of strangers. The watch ticked steadily against my pulse, each movement carrying Margaret's final message of love and hope for my future. During the drive home, anger surged through me in waves. Thomas and Amanda had stolen not just a valuable object, but a precious connection to Margaret. They had pawned her legacy for vacation, spending money. The betrayal felt so complete, so callous, that I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, mentally composing scathing confrontations. But as I pulled into my driveway, Margaret's voice seemed to whisper from her hidden note. Use your time to find joy again. Would pursuing vengeance bring joy? Would confrontation heal this wound? What would Margaret advise if she were beside me? I sat in the garden she had loved, watching bees navigate late spring flowers, the Rolex cool against my skin. Gradually, my breathing slowed. My anger, while justified, would only consume more of my precious time if I let it fester. Margaret had given me one final gift, permission to move forward. I wouldn't squander it on bitterness. Instead of the lengthy condemnation I had planned, I sent Thomas a simple text. I have the watch back. Your mother left me a message inside it. His response came hours later, defensive and surprised. What are you talking about? What message? I chose not to elaborate. Some treasures deserved protection from those who couldn't value them properly. The watch is back where it belongs, I replied. That's all that matters now. A flurry of texts followed. Questions, justifications, accusations. But I silenced my phone and returned to the garden. The confrontation Thomas clearly expected wouldn't come. I had something more valuable than the last word. I had Margaret's last words, intended for me alone. In the days that followed, I focused on securing the Rolex properly. A locksmith installed a small safe in my closet wall, hidden behind Margaret's winter sweaters that I still couldn't bear to donate. Each night, I would carefully place the watch inside, and each morning, I would wear it for a few hours, feeling connected to Margaret during my morning coffee and garden time. My grief support group noticed the change in me immediately. "You seem lighter somehow," Diane observed during our weekly meeting. I shared the story of the watch's theft and recovery, including Margaret's hidden message. Their reactions, outrage at the theft, joy at the recovery, amazement at Margaret's foresight, helped process my own complex emotions about the experience. "What will you do about your son?" Louise asked gently. "Nothing, for now," I admitted. Margaret asked me to use my time to find joy again. "Confrontation won't bring joy to either of us." Harold nodded approvingly. "Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means refusing to let someone's actions control your happiness." This distinction resonated deeply. I could work toward forgiving Thomas without allowing his entitled behavior back into my life. The boundary felt healthy rather than punitive. With this clarity, I channeled my energy into positive directions. I volunteered at Massachusetts General Hospital's Cancer Center, where Margaret had received treatment. Twice weekly, I sat with patients during chemotherapy sessions, offering conversation or quiet companionship as needed. Witnessing others' courage in the face of illness honored Margaret's own bravery. My support group friends became chosen family. We celebrated birthdays together, helped with home projects, and checked in regularly. When Diane needed transportation to medical appointments after knee surgery, I gladly became her designated driver. When Harold's basement flooded, we all pitched in with cleanup. These connections, based on mutual support rather than obligation, brought genuine warmth back into my life. Occasionally, I glimpsed Thomas and Amanda's European adventure through social media updates friends unwittingly mentioned. Elaborate meals in Paris, sunset cocktails in Santorini, designer shopping bags in Milan. Each carefully curated image showcased consumption rather than connection, the expensive trappings of experience without its substance. I felt an unexpected sadness for them. All their luxury purchases and exotic locations couldn't provide what Margaret's modest Rolex held: authentic meaning and connection. They had sacrificed something priceless for something fleeting, and didn't even recognize their loss. As summer turned to fall, I established new traditions. Instead of isolating myself on difficult anniversaries, I invited friends to help celebrate Margaret's memory. On her birthday, we planted new perennials in her garden. On our wedding anniversary, my support group joined me for dinner at our favorite restaurant, where we toasted absent loved ones and shared stories that prompted both tears and laughter. Thanksgiving approached, the first holiday season I felt capable of truly participating in since Margaret's death. Diane invited our entire support group to her home, insisting that chosen family is still family. I accepted gratefully, planning to bring Margaret's famous cranberry orange relish from her dog-eared recipe card. 2 days before Thanksgiving, an unexpected letter arrived, handwritten on expensive stationery, postmarked from Boston. Amanda's flowing script covered 3 pages with what appeared to be a genuine, if awkward, attempt at apology. "I've had time to reflect on our actions," she wrote. "While in Rome, we visited a church where an elderly man was praying beside his wife's memorial. The devotion in his expression reminded me of how you looked at Margaret's funeral. For the first time, I truly understood what the watch meant to you, beyond its monetary value. What we did was unforgivable, but I'm writing anyway to express my sincere regret." The letter continued, explaining that she and Thomas were attending couples therapy, working through issues that had led to their materialistic focus. She didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, just acknowledged the pain they had caused and her growing awareness of its significance. I placed the letter in my desk drawer, neither answering nor discarding it. Perhaps it represented a first small step toward Thomas recognizing his behavior. Perhaps it was merely Amanda's attempt to ease her own conscience. Time would reveal its authenticity or lack thereof. At Thanksgiving dinner, surrounded by friends who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. I wore Margaret's Rolex openly for the first time. Diane noticed immediately. "It looks right on you," she said simply. Margaret would approve. After dinner, as we shared what we were thankful for, I found myself speaking from a place of unexpected peace. I'm grateful for painful lessons that ultimately brought healing. This year taught me that objects are meaningful only because of the love they represent. My watch contains Margaret's final message, but more importantly, it contains her wisdom about valuing time and connection above all else. I touched the watch face gently. Through losing and recovering this watch, I learned that betrayal can sometimes lead to beautiful new connections. I lost trust in my son, but gained faith in humanity through the kindness of strangers. Most importantly, I discovered that Margaret's love transcends time and continues to guide me toward joy, just as she wanted. The experience transformed how I view possessions, relationships, and time itself. Objects, no matter how precious, remain simply vehicles for the emotions and connections they represent. Relationships, even those bound by blood, require mutual respect to thrive. And time, our most limited resource, deserves to be spent with those who value us as much as we value them. Margaret's hidden message guides me still. Each day, I strive to honor her wish that I find joy again. Some days are easier than others, but the watch on my wrist reminds me that every moment is a choice. To dwell in betrayal or to move toward healing, to cling to the past or to embrace new possibilities, to count losses or to celebrate what remains. Have you ever discovered unexpected meaning in an object from someone you've lost? Or found that betrayal eventually led to something positive in your life? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on life's complex journeys. Remember to like and share with someone who might need to be reminded that even our deepest wounds can ultimately guide us toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you use your own time wisely, filling each moment with genuine connection and love.